You know that feeling when you said it the night before?
Oh, yeah, the dreaded ritual.
Right, you go to sleep, you're finally comfortable.
Completely relaxed.
And then, I mean, in the pitch black of the morning, it just goes off.
It is awful.
It really is this jarring, mechanical, just violent intrusion into your consciousness.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
I mean, the alarm clock. It is this universal collective trauma we all just agree to participate in every single day.
We really do.
You reach over, you hit a button to stop the noise, and society just expects you to instantly transition.
Right, from 0 to 60.
Exactly. From a state of deep, paralytic unconsciousness into this fully functioning, economically productive human being.
It's wild when you think about it. It really is treated as a pure binary.
Yes, like a switch.
Exactly, like you are off and then you are miraculously on. The entire modern world operates on this bizarre assumption that human consciousness is essentially a light switch.
Right, but when you look at the actual lived experience of human energy, I mean, that simple on and off switch just doesn't exist.
No, not at all.
The reality is infinitely more complex.
And way more complex.
Because we exist in this landscape where some people genuinely actually bounce out of bed at 5 a.m.
Which is mind-blowing to some of us.
Right, with crystal clear mental acuity, ready to go. While others experience what can only be described as physical pain just trying to open their eyes at 7 a.m.
Literally physical pain.
And yet, we apply the exact same moral and professional expectations to both groups.
Which is exactly where we run into a profound structural problem.
Tell me about that.
Well, because the way you wake up, I mean, the specific biological momentum you have in those first few hours, it dictates everything.
Like your whole day.
Yeah, it dictates the entire tone of how you process information, how you regulate your emotions, and really how you interact with the world for the rest of the day.
Okay, let's unpack this because I am so excited to get into this deep dive today.
Me too. There is so much here.
So, welcome to the deep dive if you are listening right now. We've all heard the old proverb, you know, the early bird gets the worm.
Right, a classic.
It's drilled into us from childhood as the absolute ultimate standard of discipline.
Oh, absolutely.
But as we start looking at the actual biological realities of human pacing from our sources today, there is that cheekier counterquote.
I love this one.
The second mouse gets the cheese.
Yes.
So the question for you listening is, which survival strategy are you actually built for?
And that word is so important.
Right.
Built.
Built, yes. I want to emphasize that because we aren't talking about like a lifestyle aesthetic here.
No, or some productivity hack you saw online.
Right. Something you can just adopt on a whim because you bought a new planner.
Exactly. We are talking about hardwired systemic biology.
Okay, so let's get into that biology.
What's fascinating here is that when we strip away the societal expectations, you know, all the guilt.
The heavy stuff.
Yeah, and we just look at the neurological and endocrine systems, we find that the timing of your daily energy peaks is largely dictated by your genetics.
Let's really get into the mechanics of that. Because before we can even debate the merits of waking up at dawn versus staying up past midnight, we have to understand the machinery under the hood.
Right, the actual hardware.
So our sources point out two major biological frameworks governing this. First, we have the circadian rhythm.
Yes, the big one.
What exactly is that?
So the circadian rhythm is the foundational 24-hour cycle. It is an endogenously generated rhythm.
Endogenously, meaning?
Meaning it's built right into your cells. It's not just a reaction to the outside, it's internal.
Okay, got it.
And primarily, it's governed by this tiny cluster of thousands of cells in the hypothalamus.
In the brain.
Right, in the brain. It's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the SCN.
The SCN.
Yeah, the SCN. You can really think of the SCN as the master clock of your brain.
Okay.
It takes in light cues directly from your retinas.
Like literally the light hitting your eyes.
Exactly. And it uses that information to orchestrate this massive hormonal cascade throughout your entire body. It dictates when your core body temperature drops to initiate sleep, when your pineal gland starts pumping out melatonin.
Which makes you sleepy.
Right. And when cortisol begins to rise to wake you up in the morning.
So the SCN is basically the metronome for the entire body.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
It's setting the baseline tempo for everything. But then we have the second concept from the source material, which is where things get highly individualized.
The chronotype.
The chronotype, yes.
Exactly. So if the circadian rhythm is the baseline 24-hour clock, your chronotype is the specific genetic calibration of that clock.
Okay, so it's how your personal clock is set.
Right. Every single person has a slightly different natural inclination for when those hormonal cascades are actually supposed to happen.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all at all.
Not even close. For some people, the melatonin release and that temperature drop we talked about, they naturally trigger early in the evening.
Like 8 or 9 p.m.
Yeah. For others, those exact same biological signals are delayed by several hours.
And this is the part that completely reorients the conversation for me.
It really changes everything.
Because this chronotype calibration, it isn't a preference.
No.
It is deeply embedded in our DNA.
Yeah.
We are talking about specific genes, right?
Yes, literal genes.
Like the PAR1, PAR2, and PAR3 clock genes.
Exactly.
And they literally dictate the speed and the timing of this daily biological cycle.
Which fundamentally removes the moral judgment from our sleep routines.
Yes.
I mean, if you are someone whose biological clock naturally delays melatonin production until 1 a.m., your inability to fall asleep at 10 p.m. is not a failure of willpower.
You're not just scrolling on your phone to be rebellious.
Right. You aren't being stubborn. You are literally just existing within the confines of your own genetic expression.
But I really want to challenge the societal framing right here.
Please do.
Because if chronotypes are dictated by clock genes, why on earth do we treat waking up late as a character flaw?
That's a great question.
If a natural night owl struggles to be at their desk by 8 a.m., we automatically label them as lazy.
Lazy, undisciplined.
Lacking drive.
Yeah.
But we don't judge people for other genetic traits.
Right.
I mean, we don't call someone lazy because they're 5'4" instead of 6'2".
Of course not.
We don't attach moral baggage to eye color.
No, that would be ridiculous.
So why have we attached centuries of moral superiority to the genetic trait of early waking?
Well, it really comes down to a historical hangover.
A historical hangover, I like that.
Yeah, if you think about it, before the Industrial Revolution, and particularly in agrarian societies, daylight was the absolute limiting factor on human productivity.
Because if you couldn't see, you couldn't work.
Exactly. If you weren't utilizing the sunlight, you weren't producing food, you weren't surviving.
Right.
Therefore, waking with the sun was a literal prerequisite for survival and for economic contribution.
And so society just codified that biological necessity into a moral virtue.
Exactly. We made it a virtue to survive.
But the sun isn't our limiting factor anymore. I mean, we have electricity.
Precisely. We have light bulbs. The technological landscape completely changed, but the moral architecture just remained frozen.
That is so wild to think about.
So the person naturally waking up at 5 a.m. today isn't necessarily more disciplined or virtuous.
They just got lucky.
They simply won the genetic lottery in terms of what our current corporate structures have deemed the correct schedule.
The professional schedule.
Right. They're being rewarded for a biological coincidence.
Think about the collective guilt that generates. I want you, the listener, to really think about this.
Yeah, it's heavy.
Think about how many times you might have laid there in bed, staring at the ceiling after hitting snooze, just beating yourself up.
Feeling terrible about yourself.
You feel like you failed the day before your feet even hit the floor.
Right.
And all that time, you didn't realize you were actually just engaging in a futile tug-of-war with your own PER3 genes.
And that guilt is a massive cognitive load.
It really is.
It drains the exact energy you actually need to perform well during the day.
So you're exhausted from the guilt before you even start working.
Exactly. But to truly understand why society continues to reward the early riser, we need to look past the historical bias.
Okay, look at that.
We need to examine the actual mechanical advantages of the early bird lifestyle as it plays out in the modern world, because there are real advantages.
Let's break down the textbook early bird.
Okay.
These are the people whose circadian rhythms naturally initiate that cortisol awakening response right around sunrise.
Yes.
Their core temperature rises early, their sleep pressure dissipates quickly, and they hit a very specific window of peak cognitive performance.
The golden time.
Yes, the source calls it the golden time, that 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. stretch.
Right. And to understand why that time is so golden, we have to look at the state of the prefrontal cortex during those hours.
The prefrontal cortex, what does that do again?
Your prefrontal cortex handles executive function.
Yeah.
So that's planning, decision-making, complex problem-solving, all the high-level brain stuff. When an early bird wakes up at 5 a.m., their executive function is fully powered on. But crucially, their environment is entirely devoid of external stressors.
Because no one else is awake.
Exactly. No emails pinging,
No Slack notifications.
No family members asking for things.
It is a pure, uninterrupted vacuum of demand.
Right. Which means their dopamine and norepinephrine levels aren't being hijacked by immediate reactionary threats.
Okay, this is key. Explain that a bit more.
Well, normally when you wake up to an alarm and jump into a busy house, you are spiking cortisol in response to urgent things. An urgent text message, a crying kid.
Right.
But the early bird at 5 a.m., they're able to direct their neurochemistry entirely toward proactive tasks.
Proactive.
Yes. They can exercise, they can read, they can outline a project, all while their nervous system remains in a parasympathetic, calm state.
That distinction between proactive and reactive living is everything.
It really is the dividing line.
When you are proactive, you are the architect.
I like that.
You know, you are sitting at a quiet drafting table, drawing the blueprints for how your day is going to unfold. You are dictating the terms of engagement.
And contrast that with waking up reactively.
Oh man, it's completely different.
Yeah.
It's like waking up as a firefighter. The second you open your eyes, you are grabbing a hose.
Exactly. You're just scrambling.
You are putting out fires in your inbox, handling sudden requests from your boss, rushing to get the kids ready.
You are entirely at the mercy of the environment's demands.
Right. Your brain is instantly thrown into an amygdala-driven fight-or-flight response.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the early bird's biological ability to secure those 3 hours of proactive parasympathetic planning provides a massive compounding advantage over a lifetime.
A compounding bit, because they do it every single day.
Every single day, they are consistently setting a calm neurological baseline before the chaos of the day even begins.
They are operating from a foundation of control. So if you naturally have that early rhythm, that head start is an incredible superpower in a professional setting.
It is a huge asset.
You are literally beating the demands of the world to the punch.
Exactly.
But as bulletproof as the early bird lifestyle sounds from the outside, the underlying biology demands a trade-off.
There is always a cost.
It's not just infinite morning energy. There is a very strict metabolic toll.
Yes, there is an inescapable biological ledger.
A ledger.
The early bird pays for their 5 a.m. clarity when the sun goes down.
The early bird's kryptonite.
Exactly.
Let's talk about the 9 p.m. power down.
Oh, this is so real for early birds.
Because while the early bird might absolutely dominate the morning boardroom, you put them at a dinner party at 9:30 p.m., and you are looking at a fundamentally compromised human being.
Oh, completely. And this comes down to the mechanism of sleep pressure.
Sleep pressure.
Specifically, the accumulation of a neuromodulator called adenosine.
Adenosine, okay.
Yeah. From the moment you wake up, adenosine begins building up in your brain, just constantly accumulating.
Like a timer ticking up.
Exactly. It binds to receptors, slowly inhibiting neural activity and creating that feeling of sleepiness.
Okay.
By 9 p.m., an early bird who woke at 5 a.m. has massive adenosine saturation.
Their brain is basically full of it.
Yes. Their brain waves are literally slowing down. The prefrontal cortex, which was so sharp in the morning, is heavily impaired.
Wow, they are just running on fumes at that point.
Completely.
So sitting at that late dinner feels like a marathon.
It is exhausting.
It's an endurance test just to keep their eyes focused on the person talking to them.
And socially, this is a profound disadvantage.
Why is that?
Well, because they are visibly fading, or because they constantly have to excuse themselves early, they risk being perceived as uninvested.
Oh, like they don't care.
Right? Or boring, or rigidly antisocial.
So what does this all mean for the early bird?
It's a tough spot to be in.
Because they get this incredible professional head start. But are they sacrificing the entire social economy?
That's the real question.
Think about all the connections made over late dinners. You know, the spontaneous bonding at an evening concert.
Right.
The deep philosophical conversations that really only seem to happen after 10 p.m. They miss all of it.
You do.
They suffer from intense FOMO, fear of missing out.
Yeah.
And rightfully so, because a massive portion of human cultural bonding happens in the hours when their brain is actively demanding they shut down.
It is a severe trade-off. They have mastered the economy of productivity, absolutely.
Yeah.
But they are chronically bankrupt in the economy of nocturnal social bonding.
Man, that is such a great way to phrase it. Bankrupt in the social economy.
Yeah.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the other half of humanity.
The night owls.
Because as the early bird is quietly panicking,
Yeah.
looking for a polite way to leave the restaurant at 9 p.m., The night owl is experiencing something entirely different.
Oh, completely different.
They are just hitting their stride.
Yes.
So let's shift our focus to the natural, unapologetic night owl.
Okay, to understand the night owl, we have to look at how their circadian rhythm handles that adenosine buildup we just talked about.
Right.
And how it manages cortisol. For a natural night owl, the biological signals are just shifted later.
Everything is pushed back.
Right. They might experience a slight dip in energy around 7 or 8 p.m.
Oh, I've heard of this, the false dusk.
Yes, a kind of false dusk. But then their circadian alerting system kicks in to actively combat the sleep pressure.
And that is the famous second wind.
The second wind, exactly.
It's this massive, palpable burst of cognitive energy that arrives right around 10 p.m.
Yes, and the environment they enter into during that second wind is really what makes it so powerful.
Just like the early bird's morning.
Exactly. Think about the 1 a.m. quiet.
Oh, I love the 1 a.m. quiet.
It is very different from the 5 a.m. early bird quiet.
It's a completely different texture of silence.
Yes.
Because at 5 a.m., there's an anticipation of the day.
Right. The world is waking up.
The world is about to wake up, and you are rushing to prepare for it. But at 1 a.m., the day is dead.
It's over.
The demands have ceased entirely.
Yes.
There are no pending emails that are going to arrive in the next hour.
No one expects anything from you.
The flow of external expectation is completely severed.
Which triggers a very specific neurological state.
Okay, tell me about this state.
When the brain is completely unburdened from social monitoring and external demands, the default mode network can engage more freely.
The default mode network, the DMN.
Yes, the DMN. It's the brain network associated with daydreaming, spontaneous thought, and making lateral connections.
Okay.
During the day, our executive function constantly suppresses the DMN to keep us focused on linear tasks.
Because we have to get stuff done.
Right. But in the beep night, in that absolute vacuum of demand, the executive function relaxes just enough to let new unconventional ideas emerge.
Oh, wow. This perfectly explains why so many creatives, writers, artists, programmers, they absolutely swear by nocturnal work.
It's a real phenomenon.
Yeah. You actually need that distraction-free vacuum to do deep, complex lateral thinking.
Yes.
When you can't write a brilliant novel or debug complex code when your brain is constantly anticipating an interruption every 5 minutes.
Exactly. If you look at the mechanics of deep work, it requires long, unbroken stretches of focus.
Unbroken is the key word.
Right. And the night owl naturally possesses the biological energy to sustain focus exactly when the environment naturally provides the unbroken time.
It's just a perfect synergy of biology and environment.
It really is.
And crucially, the night owl is naturally synced with the social and cultural world in a way the early bird isn't.
Yes, they don't have to fake it.
Right. They don't have to fake their way through a 10 p.m. concert or a late dinner.
No, their prefrontal cortex is fully engaged.
They are witty, they are present, they're absorbing the cultural moments without constantly checking their watch.
Or calculating how few hours of sleep they're going to get.
Right. But this raises an important question, though.
What's that?
If the night owl has access to this incredible creative vacuum, and if they're perfectly aligned with the social and cultural economy of the evening, why is the modern night owl so chronically exhausted and stressed?
Because society forces them to live a double life.
A double life.
Yes. If the night is so magical, the morning is pure, unadulterated punishment.
Man, that is so true. And this brings us to the systemic bias against the night owl.
The bias is huge.
We mentioned the Industrial Revolution earlier.
Right.
We built our entire economic and educational infrastructure around a rigid 9 to 5 or 8 to 3 schedule.
And we never updated it.
Never.
We created a phenomenon known as social jet lag.
Social jet lag.
Yes. For a night owl forced to be at a desk by 8 a.m., they are essentially forcing their body to travel across 3 or 4 time zones every single day.
That is brutal.
It is. Their SCN is screaming that it is still the middle of the biological night.
Right.
Their core body temperature is still at its lowest point. Their melatonin levels are still high.
So the physical reality of that is just brutal. It's not just being a little sleepy.
No, not at all.
The scientific term from the source is sleep inertia.
Yes.
But the visceral experience of it is profound grogginess.
Grogginess, yeah.
I mean, it actually feels physically painful. Your limbs feel heavy, your eyes burn.
Your brain is just enveloped in this thick cognitive fog.
Right.
Because you are demanding high-level executive function from a prefrontal cortex that is actively being suppressed by your own endocrine system.
Oh, man.
You are asking a car to drive at highway speeds while the parking brake is fully engaged.
That is a perfect analogy. The parking brake is engaged.
Yeah.
That imagery from the source of swimming against the current is also so apt.
Yes.
Because you can be the strongest, most capable swimmer in the world. You can have perfect form.
Right.
But if you are swimming against a biological current, you are burning an immense amount of baseline energy just to tread water.
Just to not drown.
Exactly. Just to appear functional at a 9 a.m. meeting, the night owl has already exhausted a significant portion of their daily cognitive reserves.
And this is exactly where the societal stigma becomes actively harmful.
Because people judge them.
Yes.
Yeah.
The early bird effortlessly coasts into the office on a biological tailwind.
Right. They feel great.
And they are praised for their energy. Oh, look how proactive they are.
Right.
Meanwhile, the night owl fights a raging biological headwind just to arrive at the exact same time.
And they're judged for looking groggy or needing 3 cups of coffee just to survive.
Exactly. We mistake a biological mismatch for a lack of competence.
Wow. We mistake a biological mismatch for a lack of competence. That is deep.
It's incredibly unfair.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second. Let me push back.
Okay, go for it.
Because there is an argument out there, you hear it all the time, that humans evolved under the sun. So isn't the early bird inherently more natural? I mean, if a night owl is staying up until 2 a.m. under artificial LED lights, staring at a screen, aren't they just artificially delaying their rhythm?
I hear this a lot.
Aren't they just indulging in screen addiction and calling it a chronotype?
It is a really common argument, but it conflates the trigger with the underlying mechanism.
Okay, break that down.
Yes, artificial light, and particularly blue light from screens, it can definitely delay melatonin onset.
We know that for sure.
Right. But the sensitivity to that light and the baseline timing of the clock itself remains genetic.
Oh, really?
Yes. If you take a group of natural night owls and take them camping.
Like out in the woods, no screens.
Exactly, removing all artificial light completely. Their internal clocks will shift slightly earlier, yes.
Okay.
But they will still biologically trail the early birds.
No way.
Yes. The genetic offset doesn't disappear, it just compresses a bit. They are still fundamentally night owls, even in the middle of the woods.
That is fascinating. So the genetics went out. And the reality is, human society simply doesn't shut down at dusk anymore anyway.
Not at all. We demand a 24/7 infrastructure.
Right. We expect emergency rooms to be staffed with sharp, capable trauma surgeons at 3 a.m.
We expect our supply chains to move overnight so our packages arrive.
We expect the bakery to have fresh bread the literal moment the doors open at 6 a.m.
Which means someone was aggressively kneading dough at 2 a.m.
Exactly.
We hypocritically pathologize the night owl while simultaneously relying entirely on their nocturnal cognitive endurance to keep modern civilization running safely while the rest of us sleep.
Wow. We rely on them, but we punish them for it.
Yes, it's a huge contradiction.
And here's where it gets really interesting for me. How we talk about this entirely dictates how we experience it.
Oh, the language piece is crucial.
We really need to dissect the lexicon, the actual language we use to describe our energy, because the vocabulary isn't neutral at all.
No, it is heavily, heavily loaded with judgment.
Linguistic determinism is a powerful force.
Right, the words we use actively shape our cognitive reality.
Let's look at the phrase head start. We constantly praise the early bird for getting a head start on the day.
We do.
That phrase instantly frames existence as a zero-sum race.
It does.
It turns waking up into a competition. I mean, if you have a head start, it automatically implies that someone else is behind.
Yes.
It means the person waking up at 8 a.m. is starting their day at a deficit.
They are already losing a race they didn't even know they were running.
Exactly. It's so insidious.
And look at how night owls describe themselves. I mean, they use the word unapologetic.
An unapologetic night owl.
Right. But you only need to be unapologetic if the default assumption is that you should be apologizing.
Oh, wow. That is so true. It reveals this deep, ingrained defensiveness.
Exactly. The night owl has to constantly justify their existence.
Whereas the early bird's existence is just self-validating. It's assumed to be good.
Right. Or take the word grogginess.
Grogginess, yeah.
When an early bird gets tired at 9 p.m., we call it winding down.
Winding down. It sounds peaceful, natural, and healthy.
Exactly. But when a night owl is tired at 8 a.m., We call it grogginess.
It sounds sluggish, unhealthy, and just slightly pathetic.
We actively pathologize the night owl's sleep inertia.
But we completely romanticize the early bird sleep pressure. It's wild.
It really is. Even the positive language for night owls is borrowed from physical struggle.
What do you mean?
Think about it. The second wind, hitting their stride.
Oh, yeah. We use the language of marathon runners pushing past a pain barrier just to describe a night owl finally finding their focus.
It implies that their very existence is an arduous physical exertion.
Because for a long time, it basically was.
Right. But this is where the paradigm is fundamentally shifting.
Thank goodness.
Because the friction of living against your chronotype is an entirely unnecessary drain on human potential.
And the modern economic world is finally starting to realize that.
Slowly, but yes.
Let's talk about the future of work and this idea of radical self-acceptance.
I love this part.
Because the rigid factory-era time model, where human beings are treated like assembly line machinery that all must power on simultaneously.
Right.
That model is finally breaking down.
It is. The rise of remote work and asynchronous communication is slowly untethering productivity from the literal clock.
It is a massive shift.
It's a shift from time-based management to output-based management.
Okay, output-based management.
Right. If we accept that the ultimate goal is high-quality cognitive output, then forcing a night owl to write a complex analytical report at 9 a.m. is not just cruel.
It's economically inefficient.
Highly inefficient. You are demanding work during their biological trough.
So the new philosophy really has to be work smarter, not earlier.
Exactly.
If an employee writes a brilliant piece of code or designs an incredible marketing campaign, does it genuinely matter to the bottom line if they executed it at 7 a.m. with a coffee or at midnight with lo-fi music playing?
Not at all. The value is in the execution, not the timestamp.
By transitioning to biological time models, we unlock the peak creative and productive hours of the entire workforce.
We stop wasting energy fighting the circadian current and start actually leveraging it.
It makes me think of a symphony orchestra.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, if you are the conductor, you don't force the violins, the cellos, the timpani, and the brass to all play the exact same notes at the exact same volume from the very first second of the piece to the very end.
Right.
That isn't music, that's just a wall of chaotic noise.
It would be terrible.
To make a symphony work, you actually need the flutes entering lightly in the beginning. You need the strings swelling in the middle.
Right.
You need the heavy brass coming in late to provide the deep, resonant power at the end.
That is a perfect analogy. A functioning society requires all those instruments entering at their optimal biologically determined times.
Exactly. We need the early birds setting the proactive tempo in the morning.
And we absolutely need the night owls providing the deep, uninterrupted lateral problem solving in the evening.
So the mandate here, the real actionable takeaway for you, the listener, is radical self-awareness.
Yes. You have to know what instrument you are playing.
Know thyself.
You know thyself. But even more importantly, once you know your chronotype, you have to actively protect it.
Protect it, yes. You have to stop the cycle of guilt.
Completely.
If you are a night owl, stop apologizing for sleeping in on a Saturday to clear out the massive adenosine debt you've accumulated from social jet lag all week.
Your body is just doing necessary biological repair.
And if you're an early bird, stop feeling guilty for leaving a crowded bar at 10 p.m. because your prefrontal cortex is shutting down.
You are just honoring your biology.
The goal is to audit your life.
Yes, an energy audit. Look at the friction point.
Where are you unnecessarily forcing yourself into a biological headwind?
Right. Can you negotiate a later start time with your manager?
Can you shift your heavy analytical tasks to your natural peak hours?
Whether that's 6 a.m. or 11 p.m.
It's all about taking those small, incremental steps toward biological alignment.
Yeah.
So let's bring all these threads together. We have covered a massive amount of physiological and societal ground today in this deep dive.
We really have.
We started by demystifying the biology, establishing that our circadian rhythms and our chronotypes,
Governed by the SCN and those clock genes.
right, that these are hardwired realities, not behavioral choices.
Exactly. We analyzed the early bird advantage. We saw how waking into a demand-free vacuum allows for proactive parasympathetic planning.
But we also recognized that this early spike in executive function basically guarantees a severe social and cognitive crash by 9 p.m.
The trade-off. Then we explored the nocturnal domain of the night owl.
The 1 a.m. quiet.
Right, understanding how the late-night vacuum naturally activates the default mode network for peak lateral creativity.
while acknowledging the brutal physical and psychological toll of social jet lag inflicted by a 9-to-5 world.
And we unpack the deeply biased language we use to judge our natural rhythms.
Grogginess versus winding down.
Exactly, arriving at the conclusion that the future of human flourishing really requires moving away from factory time and fully embracing biological time.
We need both.
We require the complete spectrum of human energy to sustain a complex civilization.
And on that note, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final, deeply provocative thought to just mull over.
This is my favorite part.
We've talked about how society currently needs both chronotypes to function 24/7 today.
Right.
But let's push that logic all the way back into our evolutionary past.
This raises such a profound anthropological question.
It really does. If chronotypes are so deeply embedded in our genetics, and if having a mix of early birds and night owls is so critical for continuous societal function today,
is it possible that human evolution specifically designed us to sleep in shifts?
the sentinel hypothesis.
Yes, the sentinel hypothesis.
The idea that in a prehistoric hunter-gatherer tribe, having everyone fall asleep at the exact same time was a massive evolutionary vulnerability
You would be completely defenseless.
against predators or rival tribes for 8 solid hours.
But if a quarter of the tribe was biologically hardwired to stay alert until 2 a.m.,
Right.
and another quarter was biologically hardwired to wake up at 4 a.m.,
The window of total vulnerability shrinks to almost nothing.
exactly. The genetic variation isn't a flaw at all.
It was an essential survival mechanism.
The tribe survived specifically because of the night owls.
So the next time you are lying awake at 2 a.m., feeling that familiar wave of societal guilt creeping in because you aren't asleep yet,
Just stop.
remember the biology. Remember the evolutionary history.
Your ancestors might have survived the night precisely because someone with your exact genetic rhythm was wide awake.
Keeping watch over the camp while the early birds slept. You aren't broken.
No.
You are just the night watch.
I love that. It completely reframes the narrative from one of dysfunction to one of vital historical purpose.
You are the night watch. Keep your fire burning. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been great.
Keep exploring. Keep questioning the structures around you. Keep auditing your own energy. And above all, the next time that alarm clock goes off, whether it's a jarring buzz in the dark or a soft chime with the sun, be kind to your biology. Catch you on the next one.
Welcome back, learner. So, what if I told you that your lifelong struggle to wake up at 6 a.m. has absolutely nothing to do with a lack of discipline?
Right.
And actually, it has entirely everything to do with your DNA. Because for centuries, society has really loved to put us into these two intensely moralized boxes.
Oh, absolutely. The early bird and the night owl.
Exactly. Like you have the virtuous, hardworking early bird who catches the worm, and then you've got the lazy, mysterious night owl who just can't seem to get their life together before noon.
Yeah, it's a very pervasive myth.
It really is. And we've structured our entire modern world around this. I mean, our schools, our stock markets, corporate hierarchies, they all run on this assumption that waking up at dawn is a reflection of personal character.
Which is just biologically inaccurate. I mean, it's incredibly forgiving once you actually understand the mechanics of it.
Right.
Because we spent the last century operating under this framework of the Industrial Revolution, this idea that human beings are essentially biological machines.
Like we can just be powered on at 8 a.m. and powered off at 5 p.m.
Exactly. Uniformly across the entire population. But when we actually look at the clinical data surrounding chronobiology, that neat little assembly line concept just completely collapses.
It falls apart.
Yeah, it falls apart. Because we are dealing with an evolutionary spectrum of energy and timing, not a binary.
And that spectrum is our exact mission for this deep dive. Because today we're analyzing the insights from mastering the biological clock, chronotypes, and sleep hygiene.
Which is such a fantastic source text for this.
It really is. And we are stripping away all that cultural guilt and getting down to the actual neurobiology of how your internal clock functions.
Because, we aren't just here to hand you a scientific label and say, well, good luck out there.
Yeah, good luck dealing with the real world.
Right. The reality is you still have to navigate a world that point blank refuses to accommodate your biological rhythm.
Yeah.
So we're going to figure out how you can structure your day to extract your absolute peak cognitive performance. And just as critically, how to manage your life and your relationships when the people around you are operating in completely different biological time zones.
Yeah, and the stakes here are actually remarkably high.
They really are.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't just a casual conversation about how to feel a little less groggy during your morning commute.
No, not at all.
We are talking about fundamental metabolic health here, long-term cognitive preservation, and optimizing the entire neurochemical environment of your brain.
It's big stuff.
It's massive. Understanding your chronotype is essentially acquiring the user manual for your own central nervous system.
Okay, I love that framing. So before we get into the heavy physiology of it all, I want you, the learner listening right now, to do a quick, very specific check-in with yourself.
Yeah, an energy audit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Assess your cognitive state at this exact moment. Don't just ask if you're, tired. Ask yourself, how is my executive function right now?
Right, like, could you do deep work right now?
Yeah. If I handed you a complex 500-cell spreadsheet right now, could your prefrontal cortex handle it? Or would you feel like you're wading through mental molasses?
That's a great test.
Right. Like, are you coasting on residual caffeine, or are you genuinely effortlessly sharp? I want you to lock into whatever that state is, because that baseline is what we're going to use to decode everything else today.
And that current state of alertness is really the perfect entry point, because it immediately addresses the biggest blind spot in that traditional early bird versus night owl debate.
Which is that most people don't actually fit into either of those boxes.
Exactly. When people hear those two extremes, a massive portion of the population legitimately feels alienated.
Yeah. I mean, they look at the person who naturally springs out of bed at 4:30 a.m. for a 10-mile run.
Which sounds awful to most of us.
Right. And then they look at the person who's like writing code at 3 a.m. and they think, well, I don't do either of those things. I just kind of exist in the middle.
Which makes perfect sense. Because framing humanity as a binary choice between two extremes is a statistical impossibility.
It's just not how bell curves work.
No, it's not. If you don't wake up aggressively happy at dawn, but you also aren't pulling all-nighters, you aren't some weird anomaly. You are actually the statistical majority.
So what does the source text call this group?
Well, chronotype researchers categorize this middle ground group as hummingbirds, or sometimes they just use the term intermediates.
Hummingbirds. Okay.
Yeah, the clinical term often used is intermediate chronotype, and they make up roughly 60 to 70% of the human population.
Wow, so nearly 3/4 of us.
Exactly. And the reason we rarely discuss them in popular culture is simply that they don't make for dramatic anecdotes,
Yeah, there are no viral hustle culture videos about waking up at a perfectly reasonable 7:30 a.m.
Right. A hummingbird doesn't experience the massive, sudden spike of morning cortisol that propels an early bird into immediate action.
Yeah.
But they also don't experience the delayed, intense evening phase shift that gives a night owl their second wind.
So they just cruise. I've always visualized the extremes like a rigid temperature system.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Like an early bird's biological thermostat is just cranked to maximum heat the second the sun comes up.
Yeah, instant activation.
And a night owl's thermostat is programmed to blast heat right around midnight. But the hummingbird, they are essentially a highly sophisticated, adaptable climate control system.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, you just hover comfortably in the middle. You don't have those violent swings in biological temperature.
And that adaptability is exactly why hummingbirds represent the majority. I mean, it's a massive evolutionary advantage.
Really? How so?
Well, if we look at this through the lens of evolutionary biology, specifically what's called the sentinel hypothesis, the distribution of chronotypes in human populations wasn't random at all.
Okay, the sentinel hypothesis. What is that?
So think back to early Pleistocene hunter-gatherer tribes. It was highly dangerous for the entire tribe to be asleep at the exact same time.
Oh, because of predators.
Exactly. You needed early birds to take the morning watch, and you needed night owls to guard the camp late into the night.
So the extremes were literally the security system for the tribe.
Precisely. They were the sentinels. But the vast majority of the tribe, the people hunting, gathering, building, and sustaining the day-to-day operations they needed to be flexible.
They couldn't be locked into those extreme shifts.
Right. They needed to cooperate during the core daylight hours, but also be capable of staying up late around the fire for social bonding, or, waking up slightly earlier if a big hunt required it.
So hummingbirds evolved to have a wider, less rigid window of homeostasis.
Yes. Their biological clocks are less deeply anchored to the extremes of the solar cycle.
Which, honestly, that completely reframes the modern guilt trip.
It really does.
If you're listening and you've ever beaten yourself up because you couldn't replicate that, crazy morning routine of a hyper-productive CEO you saw online.
The 5 a.m. ice bath crowd.
Right. Or if you felt boring because you couldn't keep up with your friends who thrive at 2 a.m. at the club, you aren't failing at life. Your biology is literally optimized for flexibility rather than specialization.
It is a profound shift in perspective. You're realizing that what corporate hustle culture defines as a lack of discipline is actually a really sophisticated biological strength.
I love that. But let's push into the more difficult territory here.
Yeah.
Because we need to talk about the people who aren't hummingbirds.
Extremes.
Yeah. What happens when you are a true extreme night owl? Your biology is screaming at you to sleep until 10 a.m.
But reality disagrees.
Exactly. Your corporate job or your kid's school drop-off demands that you are out the door by 7 a.m.
Yeah, that's where the real pain points are.
So can you actually rewire your brain to become an early bird? Like, is there a biohack or a supplement or some routine that fundamentally changes your nature?
The short answer, based on the absolute bedrock of current genetic research from our source, is no.
No. Just a flat no?
Flat no.
Yeah.
You cannot change your fundamental chronotype. The prevailing consensus is that your chronotype is dictated by specific genetic markers.
Okay, genetics.
Yeah, most notably a gene known as PER3.
PER3. Okay, walk me through what that actually is, because this is where the conversation shifts from, productivity advice to hard genetics.
Right, so PER3, or period circadian regulator 3, is a gene that helps regulate your internal biological clock.
Okay.
And what's fascinating is that this gene actually comes in different lengths. Specifically, what geneticists call variable number tandem repeats, or VNTRs.
Variable number tandem repeats.
Yeah. And basically, people who have longer versions of the PER3 gene strongly tend to be early birds.
So the physical length of the gene dictates it.
Exactly. Because of that longer allele, they build up sleep pressure, which is the chemical need for sleep much faster during the day.
Oh, I see.
And people with the shorter version of the allele tend to be night owls. Their biological clocks literally tick at a slightly different pace.
Okay, so it's not a mindset issue. It is a structural reality of my DNA.
Completely structured.
It's like having blue eyes or brown eyes. I can't just meditate my way into having a longer PER3 gene.
Exactly. You cannot willfully alter your genetic code.
Okay, but if I'm putting myself in the learner's shoes right now, that sounds incredibly bleak.
It can sound that way at first, yeah.
Right, because if I have the short PER3 gene and I am biologically wired to be a night owl, but my entire career requires me to be in a boardroom at 8 a.m. every Monday.
Yeah.
Am I just doomed? Am I destined to spend the next 40 years of my life in a permanent state of cognitive impairment?
You aren't doomed. But to survive that environment, we have to make a very sharp distinction between changing your nature and shifting your schedule.
Changing nature versus shifting schedule. Okay, break that down.
You will never change your underlying nature. If you are a true night owl, you will likely never feel a spontaneous surge of genuine, unprompted joy at 6 a.m.
Right. No sunrise euphoria.
Right. Your body will never naturally select that time to be awake. However, you absolutely can manipulate your biological systems to shift your schedule.
Meaning I can wake up early without feeling like I've been hit by a truck.
Exactly. It's the difference between adaptation and transformation.
Okay, I can't transform into an early bird, but I can force an adaptation.
Yes. Exactly.
But how do we actually execute that? Because the standard advice is always just, set your alarm for 5 a.m., power through the exhaustion, and eventually your body gets used to it.
Which is terrible advice.
It really is. Because I know from personal experience that usually results in about 3 days of total misery before I inevitably smash the snooze button until 8 a.m. again.
The power through it method fails because it induces massive physiological shock.
Physiological shock.
Yeah. Your circadian rhythm isn't just a clock in your brain. It dictates the temperature of your organs, your heart rate, and your hormone production.
It's a whole body system.
Precisely. When you suddenly shift your wake time by 3 hours, you are essentially inducing severe acute jet lag without ever leaving your house.
Oh, wow.
The cellular dissonance is immense.
Cellular dissonance. That is a great way to describe it. It's like your liver thinks it's 3 a.m., your brain thinks it's 6 a.m., and your adrenal glands have absolutely no idea what's going on.
That's exactly what's happening, which is why the only clinically effective methodology for shifting a sleep schedule is microadjustments.
Microadjustments.
Specifically, moving your wake-up time by no more than 15 minutes every 3 to 4 days.
15 minutes. That seems almost painfully slow.
It is slow.
Like if I need to shift my schedule back by 2 hours, that's going to take me weeks.
It will take weeks, but it's the only way to bypass the body's alarm systems.
Because if you go too fast, you trigger the shock.
Right? Let me explain why. Your core body temperature drops to its absolute lowest point roughly 2 hours before your natural wake time.
Okay.
That moment is known as your T-min.
T-min. Temperature minimum.
Exactly. Now, if you set an alarm that forces you awake before your T-min, when your body is at its coldest and most metabolically inactive, your brain registers it as a physiological emergency.
Oh, so that's why you feel nauseous and groggy and completely disoriented.
Yes. Your body thinks something is terribly wrong. A 15-minute shift is small enough that you drag your T-min backward gradually without triggering that emergency response.
Okay, so slow surgical 15-minute increments. I can see how that works.
It's highly effective if you stick to it.
But shifting the alarm is only half the battle, right? We have to talk about the primary mechanism that allows that shift to actually take hold.
Yes, the cues.
Right. And that brings us to the single most powerful tool in the chronobiologist's arsenal. And spoiler alert for the learner, it's not caffeine.
Nope.
It's not melatonin gummies. It's light.
Light is the master architect of the circadian rhythm, period.
The master architect.
Everything else, food, exercise, temperature, those are secondary cues. Light is the primary anchor.
So let's get into the actual neurological pathways here, because I don't just want to say light wakes you up.
Right, that's too simple.
Yeah, what is practically happening in my brain when I open the blinds at 7 a.m.?
Okay, so inside your retina, there is a very specific type of cell called an intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cell, or IPRGC.
IPRGC.
Okay, now unlike the rods and cones that help you see shapes and colors, these cells exist almost entirely to detect the presence of bright light.
So they aren't for vision, really. They're just light detectors.
Exactly. Specifically, they're looking for short wavelength, blue spectrum daylight.
Which is morning light.
Right. When those cells detect morning light, they send a direct electrical signal down the optic nerve to a tiny cluster of neurons in your hypothalamus.
And what's that cluster called?
It's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the SCN.
The SCN, the master clock.
The master clock. Yeah. The SCN receives that signal from the eyes and immediately issues a neurochemical command to the pineal gland.
What's the command?
It says, halt all production of melatonin immediately.
Stop the sleep hormone.
Yes. And at the exact same time, it signals the adrenal glands to release a spike of cortisol.
Oh, wow. So it's a two-part process.
Exactly. That combination, the sudden absence of the sleep hormone and the sudden influx of the stress and alertness hormone, that is what actually clears the biological fog.
Which explains so much. Because sitting in a dimly lit apartment, drinking a massive cup of coffee, still leaves you feeling kind of sluggish.
Because you haven't signaled the SCN.
Right. You're giving yourself a chemical stimulant with the caffeine, but you haven't triggered the SCN to actually shut off the melatonin production.
You're basically driving a car with the parking brake still engaged.
That is a highly accurate analogy. So to disengage the parking brake, you really need that bright overhead photon exposure.
You do. Stepping outside into direct sunlight for 10 minutes or using a clinical grade light therapy lamp of at least 10,000 lux, that is non-negotiable if you are trying to artificially shift your chronotype earlier.
10,000 lux! That's pretty bright.
It has to be to trigger those specific cells.
But the SCN is a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
Because if it's reacting to light in the morning to wake us up, it's also highly vulnerable to light in the evening.
Extremely vulnerable.
And I have to admit something here because I think it addresses a massive point of friction for a lot of people.
Go for it.
The term sleep hygiene, it gets thrown around constantly as the solution to this evening light problem.
It does. It's everywhere.
And I've always struggled with sleep hygiene because it feels like a mandate for absolute perfection.
Oh, I completely agree.
Like if I slip up and look at my phone at 10 p.m., I feel like I've ruined the entire night. The anxiety spikes and then I definitely can't sleep.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. So how do we engage with this biology without turning bedtime into a high-pressure performance metric?
That is such an important distinction to make. Because sleep anxiety, the fear of not sleeping perfectly, is often way more disruptive than poor sleep habits themselves.
Wow, really?
Yes. We need to reframe sleep hygiene completely based on what the source material is telling us. It shouldn't be viewed as a sterile clinical checklist where one mistake means failure.
So what should it be?
It's better understood as establishing a gradient of biological signals. You are simply trying to give your SCN the strongest possible hint that the day is ending.
Okay, so lower the stakes. It's not a pass or fail test.
Exactly. It's about trends and nudges. But to understand why the phone is such a problem in that gradient, we have to look at the half-life of biological disruption.
The half-life, okay. Explain that.
When you stare at a smartphone at 11 p.m., you are beaming that exact short-wavelength blue light directly into those iPRGC cells in your retina.
The same ones that look for the sunrise.
Yes. Your SCN registers that light and assumes the sun has miraculously risen at midnight.
Oh, no.
And so it immediately suppresses your melatonin production.
And the problem is melatonin doesn't just instantly bounce back the second you turn the phone off, right?
Precisely. It takes time for the pineal gland to ramp production back up.
Right.
So even if you put the phone down and close your eyes, you have artificially delayed your biological clock. You've induced a neurochemical state of daytime alertness that takes hours to clear.
Okay, so the foundation really is managing our own internal environment, controlling the light, managing the SCN, micro-adjusting the alarm.
Those are the core tools, yes.
But we have to zoom out here, because human beings do not live in isolated biological vacuums.
We certainly don't.
All of this internal management hits a massive wall when you share a physical living space with someone whose biological clock is the exact opposite of yours.
Yes. The chronotype clash.
The chronotype clash.
It is one of the most under-discussed friction points in modern relationships.
And it creates such a specific, miserable dynamic. I like to compare it to running a restaurant where the head chef and the general manager are working entirely different shifts.
That's a great way to picture it.
Right. So the early bird general manager is walking through the door at 6 a.m., highly energized. They're ready to prep the tables, discuss the menu, solve problems.
Firing on all cylinders.
Yes. Meanwhile, the night owl head chef is stumbling in, completely disoriented, and the kitchen is entirely dark.
Just trying to survive the morning.
Exactly. And then, by 9 p.m., the kitchen is finally firing on all cylinders. The chef wants to innovate and create, but the general manager is asleep, standing up in the dining room.
It's a logistical nightmare.
It really is.
But the emotional and psychological toll is actually much worse than the logistics.
Really? How so?
When we look at the neurochemistry of circadian misalignment in relationships, we see major disruptions in emotion regulation.
Emotion regulation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you force an early bird to engage in a heavy emotional conversation at 10 p.m., their prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for logic, empathy, and impulse control, is functionally exhausted.
So they're just running on fumes.
They literally don't have the neurochemical resources to be empathetic at that hour.
That makes so much sense.
Right. And conversely, the night owl at 7 a.m. is experiencing high levels of sleep inertia. Their brain hasn't cleared out the adenosine from the night before.
Right. The sleep pressure.
Yes. So if the early bird tries to eagerly discuss weekend plans, the night owl's brain perceives that energetic conversation not as affection, but as a hostile sensory intrusion.
A hostile sensory intrusion.
Yep.
That is such a clinical way of saying they find you incredibly annoying.
Well, yes. They snap, they get irritable, and then the early bird feels rejected.
Which leads directly to the toxic moralization we talked about earlier. It breeds a very specific kind of domestic resentment.
It really does.
The early bird looks at the night owl sleeping until 10 a.m. on a Saturday and attaches the label lazy.
And the night owl looks at the early bird who physically cannot stay awake for a movie at 9 p.m. And attaches the label boring.
Exactly. You stop seeing a biological reality and you start seeing a character flaw in the person you love.
That is the exact trap outlined in the text.
Yeah.
You are moralizing a neurobiological phase shift.
Which is so unfair.
It is. The single most important intervention for a couple experiencing this is a radical shift in attribution.
Okay, what does that mean practically?
It means when your partner is irritable at 7 a.m. or falling asleep at 9 p.m., you have to attribute that behavior to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, not to their love for you or their personal drive.
So basically, blame the hypothalamus, not the husband.
Exactly. Once you depersonalize the biology, you can actually implement structural compromises.
Okay, let's talk about those compromises. What's the strategy?
The most effective clinical strategy for this involves 3 distinct phases: acceptance, the golden hour, and sacred time.
Okay, acceptance is pretty obvious based on what we've said. Stop trying to change their PER3 gene.
Right, accept the biology.
But break down the golden hour for me, because this seems like the actual mechanical fix for the relationship.
The golden hour is about auditing your overlapping energy levels. If you plot an early bird's energy graph and a night owl's energy graph, there is almost always an intersection point where both individuals have adequate executive function and emotional bandwidth.
Oh, like a Venn diagram of being awake and pleasant.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Usually this falls somewhere in the late afternoon or early evening, say between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m.
So the early bird has passed their afternoon slump but hasn't shut down for the night.
Right.
And the night owl is fully awake and ramping up toward their peak.
Yes. That intersection is the golden hour. And the compromise requires you to aggressively protect that window for connection.
So that's when you do the heavy lifting in the relationship.
Exactly. That is when you have the difficult conversations about finances. That is when you make complex decisions. Or that is simply when you intentionally connect.
So you stop expecting quality connection at the extremes of the day, and you just manufacture it during the intersection.
You plan for it, yes.
Which naturally leads to the third phase, which is sacred time.
Yes, sacred time.
Because if the middle of the day is for connection, the extremes of the day have to become respected biological boundaries.
Sacred time is the realization that you do not have to sync your entire lives.
Which is such a relief to hear.
For the early bird, those hours between 5 a.m. and 8 a.m. are their biological prime time. The night owl must respect that this is their time for deep work, exercise, or solitary peace without demanding these stay in bed.
And vice versa.
Right. Conversely, the early bird must respect that the night owl's peak creative or leisure hours happen between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m.
So no guilt tripping the night owl for being awake and no guilt tripping the early bird for going to sleep.
Exactly.
Which honestly sounds like a great excuse to buy a really high-end pair of noise-canceling headphones.
That is the ultimate relationship saver.
Yeah. The night owl gets to watch their documentaries or work on their novel at midnight in the living room, and the early bird gets to sleep in complete silence. It's biological boundary setting.
It is. And it works because it stops demanding that one partner suffer a physiological deficit to appease the other.
Okay, so we've established the genetics, we've navigated the neurochemistry of light, and we've saved the relationship from the chronotype clash.
We've covered a lot.
But now we have to transition into the arena where this biology faces its absolute harshest test.
The modern workplace.
The workplace. Because understanding your chronotype is fascinating, but applying it to a rigid 9-to-5 schedule is where the actual friction happens for most people.
This is where we transition from biological theory to cognitive load management.
Cognitive load management. Okay.
Because how you distribute your tasks throughout the day should be entirely dictated by your chronotype, not by the arbitrary structure of an 8-hour workday.
Let's talk about the emotional pain point of this first, because there is a very specific kind of professional shame associated with this misalignment.
Oh, definitely.
Like sitting in an 8 a.m. sync meeting, feeling like you're completely checked out, while a naturally early rising colleague is pitching 5 new ideas and looking like a superstar.
It makes you feel incompetent.
It really does.
But it's a false equivalency. The source text makes this very clear. You are judging a fish by its ability to climb a tree.
I love that quote.
To understand why that early morning meeting is so devastating for a night owl, we need to introduce the concept of sleep pressure.
Okay, sleep pressure. Let's dig into that.
In chronobiology, this is known as process S.
Process S. Yes.
Process S is driven by a chemical called adenosine.
Adenosine.
Right. And adenosine builds up in your brain every hour you are awake, and it is cleared out while you sleep.
So adenosine is the actual chemical that makes us feel physically sleepy, right?
Yes, exactly.
It's a thing that caffeine blocks.
Precisely. Caffeine binds to adenosine receptors, masking the sleepiness.
Oh, so the adenosine is still there, you just can't feel it.
Exactly. Now, for an early bird, their biological clock, which is called process C, wakes them up early, and their brain efficiently clears that adenosine quickly.
Process C for circadian.
Yes. So by 8 a.m., an early bird has maximum executive function. Their process S is low, and their process C is high.
But for a night owl?
For a night owl, process C is delayed, At 8 a.m., their brain is still bathed in residual adenosine.
Oh, wow.
Their prefrontal cortex is physically impaired by that chemical.
So the strategy for an early bird in the workplace is entirely different from the strategy for a night owl.
Completely different.
Let's map this out. If I am a classic early bird, what is my absolute best operational strategy for a standard workday?
If you're an early bird, your absolute best strategy is a concept called front-loading.
Front-loading?
Yes. Your peak cognitive window, the time when your cortisol is optimal and your adenosine is lowest, is roughly between 8 a.m. and 11 a.m.
So those first 3 hours.
Yes. You must fiercely protect this window from low-value tasks.
Meaning, do not walk into the office at 8 a.m. and spend the first 2 hours casually organizing your inbox or scrolling through the company Slack channel.
That is cognitive malpractice for an early bird.
Cognitive malpractice.
It is. You are wasting your most powerful neurochemical state on administrative trivia. You need to front-load the most complex, analytically demanding, or creatively taxing work into those first 3 hours.
Write the complex proposal, analyze the raw data, do the deep strategic thinking.
Exactly.
Because you know that the crash is coming.
Yes. An early bird's biology naturally dictates a significant dip in alertness by 2 p.m.
The dreaded afternoon slump.
Right. If you save the heavy analytical work for the afternoon, you will struggle immensely. You use the afternoon slump for the low-friction task.
Like responding to routine emails, attending status meetings, organizing files.
Exactly. Let your brain coast when it needs to coast.
Okay, now let's flip the script. The night owl.
Let's do it.
And I want to spend time here because, as we've discussed, the corporate world is deeply biased against them.
Fairly so.
If I am a night owl forced to be at a desk at 9 a.m., how do I hack my day so I don't get fired for underperforming in the morning?
The strategy for the night owl is the exact inverse. Backloading.
Backloading. Okay.
When a night owl arrives at 9 a.m., they are in a state of cognitive conservation. Their brain is still clearing adenosine.
So they shouldn't try to write the complex proposal right away.
They absolutely should not attempt deep, creative, or highly analytical work at this time. It will take them 3 times as long and yield inferior results.
So they use the morning for the low-friction tasks.
Yes. The 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. block for a night owl should be strictly administrative.
Answer the easy emails, organize the calendar, handle the routine paperwork.
Exactly. You are coasting on low cognitive power while your biological clock slowly ramps up.
You're basically organizing the kitchen while you wait for the stove to heat up.
That's a perfect way to look at it, because a night owl's peak cognitive window doesn't usually arrive until late afternoon.
When their body temperature is optimal and their circadian alerting signal is strongest?
Yes. Between 3 p.m. and 7 p.m., a night owl can achieve a state of flow and deep focus that far surpasses what an early bird could do at that same hour.
So if you have any autonomy in your job, you have to defend that late afternoon window for your most important work.
Protected at all costs.
But what about our adaptable majority, the hummingbirds?
The intermediates, right.
How do they optimize a workday when they don't have those massive, singular spikes in energy at the extremes?
Hummingbirds thrive on a protocol called the split shift.
The split shift.
Because their energy curve is flatter, they are highly susceptible to midday fatigue if they try to grind through a continuous 8-hour block. Their biology requires a reset.
Walk me through the mechanics of a split shift. How does it work?
A split shift involves working deeply for a 3 to 4 hour block in the morning, say 9 a.m. to 1 p.m.
Okay, so a solid block of focus.
Then you step completely away from cognitive labor for a prolonged, genuinely restorative break.
So not just eating a sandwich while staring at a spreadsheet.
No, absolutely not. You physically remove yourself to allow the brain to reset. Exercise, a walk outdoors to get photon exposure, or deep relaxation.
And then what?
Then you return for a second, highly productive block from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m.
It leverages their natural flexibility by creating 2 smaller peaks of productivity rather than forcing one massive, unsustainable mountain of effort.
Exactly. It works with their homeostasis, not against it.
But, all of these strategies, front-loading, back-loading, split shifts, they all assume you have some level of autonomy over your schedule.
Which is a luxury not everyone has.
Right, which brings us to the darkest corner of chronobiology in the text. What happens when you have zero autonomy?
Yeah, this is the tough part.
What happens when a severe night owl is forced to work on an early morning construction crew, or an early bird is forced to work the night shift in an emergency room?
You are describing a state of chronic circadian misalignment.
Chronic misalignment.
And it is vital that we don't sugarcoat the biological reality of this. Chronic misalignment is a pathological state.
A pathological state, meaning it's a disease state.
Yes. It is not just about feeling tired. It is a fundamental disruption of your physiology at the cellular level.
We briefly called it permanent jet lag earlier, but let's look at what that actually does to the body over the course of, say, 5 or 10 years.
It's devastating.
Right.
When you are chronically misaligned, your central clock, the SCN, is receiving light signals that constantly contradict your behavioral schedule.
Because you're waking up in the dark or trying to sleep when the sun is up.
Exactly. And this causes your peripheral clocks, the clocks in your liver, your pancreas, your gut, to fall completely out of sync with your brain.
Wait, my liver has its own clock.
Every organ does. Every cell has a circadian rhythm.
Oh, wow. So your brain is telling your body to be awake, but your pancreas thinks it's the middle of the night.
Yes. And the consequences of that are severe.
Tell me.
When your pancreas is confused about what time it is, it stops producing insulin efficiently. This is why chronic misalignment is highly correlated with metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, and eventually type 2 diabetes.
Just from waking up at the wrong time.
Just from living against your biological clock for years on end, yes.
That is terrifying.
Furthermore, your body is constantly pumping out cortisol to force you to stay awake against your nature.
The stress hormone.
Right. Which leads to chronic systemic inflammation, suppressing the immune system, and massively increasing cardiovascular risk.
It's literally breaking down the machinery of the body by forcing the gears to grind in the wrong direction.
That's a perfect visual for it.
Which just completely shatters the illusion that toughing it out is a badge of honor.
It's not a badge of honor, it's a profound health risk.
It is a massive systemic health risk that we as a society largely ignore in the name of productivity.
Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of everything we've uncovered today from the source material.
The big takeaway.
Yeah. The mission was to figure out how to navigate a world that ignores your internal clock. The answer isn't to fight your biology harder. No, fighting it is what breaks the machine.
The answer is radical biological self-awareness. You have to know your exact chronotype, whether it's coded in your PR3 gene to be an early bird, a night owl, or a hummingbird.
You have to know your baseline.
You have to understand the mechanics of the SCN and how light manipulates your neurochemistry. And most importantly, you have to stop apologizing for the way your brain is wired.
That really is the core takeaway. Knowledge of your circadian rhythm is a protective mechanism.
Protective, I like that.
It allows you to build boundaries around your sleep hygiene, communicate effectively with your partner to avoid the chronotype clash, and strategically deploy your cognitive energy at work.
So, learner, here is your challenge. Take one piece of this neurobiology and apply it to your reality tomorrow.
Just one small thing.
Exactly. Look at your task list. Find your most demanding, cognitively heavy project and move it to your actual biological peak window.
If you're an early bird, front load it.
If you're an owl, push it to the late afternoon.
Or, tonight, experiment with your SEN.
Yeah. Dim the lights, put the screens away an hour earlier, and stop giving your brain the chemical signal for high noon when you're trying to rest.
Lower the stakes, stop demanding perfection, and just send the right signals. Small strategic alignments of your environment with your internal clock yield compounding benefits over time.
You don't have to overhaul your entire life overnight. Just start making choices that respect your biology.
Respect the biology.
Respect the biology. Now, I want to leave you with a final, slightly uncomfortable thought to mull over, inspired by the brutal reality of chronic misalignment we just discussed.
I'm intrigued.
If we know clinically, genetically, and metabolically that forcing a night owl into a dawn schedule physically damages their cellular health and destroys their cognitive potential,
Which the data overwhelmingly shows.
then what does that say about the entire architecture of our society?
Oh, that's a big question.
From mandated 7:30 a.m. school start times for teenagers whose biology is literally screaming for sleep, to the rigid, immovable 9 to 5 corporate workday.
It's all built for the early birds.
Right. What if we aren't just dealing with a few tired employees? What if our entire societal structure is inadvertently suppressing the peak potential, the health, and the raw creativity of almost half the human population simply because we've confused biological rhythm with a lack of moral discipline?
It's a sobering thought.
What if we've been running the entire system on the wrong clocks this whole time? Something to think about no matter what time of day your brain decides to be awake.